Good morning and welcome back to the show. We are here with Class of 21 alum, performer, composer, and science researcher Toussaint Miller. How are you, Toussaint?
I'm well. I'm well. Thanks for having me. I appreciate this. I'm interested to see what we talk about today.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time to do this. I know you're busy. Well, to
Of
kick
course.
things off, can you take us back to your childhood in Cleveland? What were you like as a kid?
What was I like? I don't know. I the earliest memories I have of my childhood were definitely around like animals. I was a big Animal Planet kid. And so I played this game with my brother and grandfather growing up, called What's My Favorite Animal? And so we would pretty much highlight or like give hints around like the habitat the animal lived in, like like was it a tundra, was it a desert, was it a like a grassland, and then give hints about like whether it was an herbivore or an omnivore, until we kind of distilled it down to figure out what their animal was. And so that was my focus when I was like 8, 9, 10, like PBS Kids, Animal Planet, that was my stuff. And then as I got older, I kind of lost the ecological interest as much, and then that sort of siphoned off into my interest in medical sciences. From I think I was 13 or 14. My grandmother told me to read the book Gifted Hands by Ben Carson, which, current politics aside, I guess I wouldn't endorse that too much. But at the time, it was a really interesting and profound thing for a Black man to be getting so much laud and praise about his scientific advancements and medical prowess. And so I, from that, became really interested in becoming a physician and a surgeon. Yeah, so that's like where my science interests started. And then I was a musician in middle school. Well, I started my musicianship in middle school. So, I before US went to this school called Chambers Elementary, which no longer is in existence, but at Chambers, we had to pick an instrument, or we had to like participate in the school band. And the options were flute, clarinet, trumpet, snare, or trombone. The flute was a little too dainty for me, so that was out. Clarinet sounded squeaky. I wasn't really messing with that. The snare drum was stupid to me because like why am I just gonna play a snare drum? If I'm gonna play an instrument, the drums, just give me the whole kit. Like stop piecemealing the stuff. Trombone was a little too bulky, and so what was left was the trumpet, and I've pretty much kept up with my playing ever since. I played in the U.S. Jazz band, and then at Harvard, where I am going to graduate in 3 weeks. I played in the Harvard Jazz Orchestra and um, gigged around Boston with friends, and all of that jazz.
What's one of those like earliest moments when you realize that like you really love music or were like just really fascinated in kind of science? Or is there a specific moment where you realize that like both of them could kind of be kind of cool together?
Yeah, so I shortly after falling in love with music and developing, at least in an infancy stage, my musicianship, I read this article um that was talking about music therapy and Alzheimer's. And it was looking at how, Alzheimer's patients couldn't remember how to do tasks that they've done every day for decades, but or their own names, but could remember, songs to lyrics that they heard in high school, which, if you're developing Alzheimer's in your late 60s, 70s, that was quite a way away. Um, and so I was like, wait a minute, there's definitely some intrinsic um, therapeutic aspect to music that we are kind of overlooking, I guess, or not putting enough intention into figuring out. So that was the moment I think where I learned that medicine and music, um, and art generally can coexist, and not only coexist, but form a very necessary nexus in order to research and find the cures for some diseases that are ailing so many people.
Yeah.
What were your experiences like playing music at US? You kind of mentioned that real quick. Were you like super
Yeah.
involved with the jazz band, or were you just kind of playing for fun?
Yeah, so at that point, I think I don't know if it's changed, but when I was in high school, I had to like you had to do 2 credits of art. Is that still the case?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so because I was a musician and because I liked the people who were in the jazz band, Mr. K was a big part of my high school career. I just stuck with it. I got in freshman year and just stuck with it because it counts as only a quarter of a credit. So like if you did 4 years, you would get the two. And so I was a pretty avid member of the jazz band, and it was a pretty salient part of my identity in high school for sure. I applied to schools with an optional music portfolio just because that I enjoyed making that kind of music so much and performing with my friends a great deal. So that was the extent of my musical expression in high school. It's obviously gotten a lot, it's obviously flourished a lot since leaving US just because I had more opportunities and more space to sort of explore that interest of mine. But I think that without being a member of the jazz band, my time at US would be completely different for sure.
Well, Tucson, at just 12 years old, you received the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Community Service Award. You were the youngest
Right.
person ever to receive this award. And, at such a young age, being on stage at Severance Hall, being honored, can you tell us how that happened and what kinds of community service you were doing to be honored so young?
You guys really did your research. Oh my gosh, this is so funny. Yeah, I was at that point well, first of all, I come from a family where giving back and service is very important. So from a very young age, clearly I was invested in making sure that I was being an active member of my community. At that moment, I was playing my horn that I, recently picked up at nursing homes and elderly facilities, as well as starting what would eventually become the Chapters 4.0 mentorship program, which seeks to do something very similar to the REACH program, which is, bridge uh the gap between the intergenerational gap between Black men. So I along with a few other peers of mine in high school uh were able to the program had been established in a really defined way at that point, but my peers in high school on Saturdays, I think the first and third Saturday of every month would um help out or like would mentor fifth graders from or third, it was either third or fifth graders, I'm forgetting, but from the Warrensville Center or the Warrensville City School District. And before that it was the East Cleveland City School District. So um from a very young age, service was important. And when I got that award, it was mostly for like musical expression by way of community service. But then that obviously grew into something that was super important for me in high school as well. And I'd argue, hopefully, important for my peers who were also involved with it.
Yeah, well, that's amazing. And you've talked about
Yeah.
your family, mentioned them multiple times as being a big influence. Can you tell us a little
Yeah.
more about what your family was like and the impact they had on you?
Yeah, for sure. I grew up in a relatively small family. Um, and they all live in Cleveland. So I was not, or most of them live in Cleveland. So, when people are like, oh, I'm going to my family reunion in North Carolina or in Texas or in Chicago. Well, that doesn't make sense because I named all states and then named Chicago or Illinois. Um, and it's like 40, 50, 60 of us gonna be there. I'm like, and everybody's got on the t-shirts. I'm like, okay, well, all my family lives around the corner, so we're all here for Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, all of it. And we're a dot. I consider family, my mom, my grandmother, my uncle, my cousin, and my younger brother. So we are very close. Growing up, family was a very important thing for me. And it was my first practice of community. And because we were such a tight-knit, close group of individuals, um, I felt like I was raised in a home that uh didn't have many like secrets. Like, my brother knew that he could tell me anything. I knew I could tell my mom anything. I knew I could tell my younger brother, my grandmother anything. And so, family I think was incredibly important for me because it provided a very grounding, safe space. Um, I also think I got my music taste from my mom and my grandmother, at least it in the beginning. I was raised on a lot of jazz music, Ella Fitzgerald, Miriam Makeba, um, Sarah Vaughan. Um, Not only jazz, I was raised on, Sade and Jill Scott, Erica Badu. And then from there, once I got to high school or got to college, my music taste obviously expanded because I'm now getting influenced by different people that are coming from different places, and was able to open my worldview that way. But I think family is definitely what has influenced a lot of my one character and a lot of the way in which I see the world. Um, and I guess through music, listen and interact orally through with the world as well.
Yeah. Well, shifting gears back to US here, you transitioned from public school to US in seventh grade. And that must have been a
Yes.
big change for you. So, first of all,
Yeah.
why did you choose to attend university school? And then,
Mhm.
second of all, what were your first impressions when you arrived?
I let's see, that is such a long time ago. I have to like it doesn't feel like all that long ago, but like when you contextualize that was like what 10 years ago, 9 years ago, which is nuts. Um I think I remember shadowing. Um, and liking it. It was different because the school I went to before was co-ed. Obviously, US is not. The school that I went to before was predominantly black. Obviously, US is not. And so it was a different shift culturally. But I wouldn't say it was like hard or easy. I mean, it was just what it was. I think that I made a good group of friends when I first got there, and those dynamics obviously morphed and evolved as I grew as a person and as I went through middle and then into high school. But I don't honestly remember all that many specific details about what my first interactions were like. I think it was a a natural shift in my academic maturation. Um, I wouldn't say I struggled too much academically. I think I was challenged in many ways, and I think that I was well prepared in other ways. Um, so I don't know. I think coming to US offered a great deal of exposure and access to things that I had not had before at my old school. But and I'm glad that it happened. I just don't remember the specific details about, oh, like I can point to this one thing that made me realize that US was different than the others, rather than the more salient things that I've already mentioned.
Going to high school, what were your activities, kind of interests like at the time? Would you kind of get involved with? I mean, you're
Yeah.
kind of new to US, you came into seventh grade, but you're still only 2 years into US. What was that like to kind of transition to high school?
Yeah, the transition to high school was interesting. So in middle school, I picked up tennis, and in ninth grade, I kept with it, but for some reason, I got pulled to squash. And I think that was because of the fact that I was looking for a way to stay sort of in shape between seasons, and squash is a winter sport. Tennis is a spring sport. And so I had a friend who had played squash our ninth grade year. We were in the same class. And he said you should just like come try out, if nothing more than to get some cardio in. I was like, all right, let's do it. And so I tried out. Um, and I think now the strokes and the movement are very different, but the base level athleticism required for both tennis and squash is very transferable. And so I did okay for never picking up a squash racket, got super interested in it, and wanted to get better at it. And so I got a good group of guys, and we practiced on the weekends. During like study halls, we would go down to the squash courts and hit. So much so, and so often that I, very quickly became eligible to play on the varsity team and became the team captain my senior year. Um, so squash was definitely a new thing for me that was a very important shift in my development. I think that being a part of the US jazz band as well was not a huge shift, but it was a very important one in that I started developing a sense of musicianship. I think it's very different. It's a very different thing to play an instrument and then to have a musicianship. And that to me means that you are not only playing the notes, but you understand the context of the notes quarterly as well as historically. Like what song, like what era was this song written in? What other musical advancements are going around or were coming about during this time? What political struggle or achievement was happening when this song was written? And so I think that when I got to US and really started in 10th grade, after a year of the jazz band, of being in the jazz band rather, I started developing a musicianship and understanding that context was so important to being not only a good musician who can play the notes, but who can make those feelings and the emotions that the composer or the writer of that song intended digestible to the audience. And so squash was super important. The jazz band was super important. I think the Pembroke Society was also very important for me because obviously it offered a very safe, fun, interesting, lovely space of affinity. And I appreciated that it was under the leadership at the time of Miss Carolyn Neal, and Mr. James Lewis. Um, and so I think those are the no. There's so much more. I was an Anderson Scholar. I was a Stannard Fellow. Science, obviously, at that time was really interesting. And I got super passionate about what I was telling you about earlier with the Alzheimer's, memory, cognitive function, and music. French was also super important. I like maxed out on the French courses at US. Um, After not being able to speak any in middle school, which was interesting, but I was super passionate about that. So that was important. Well, now I'm like digging in the memory bank of things that I did. I was the head prefect. I was in Murray House. Um, what else happened? If something else comes up, I'll let you know, but these are the things that like are on the tip of my tongue for sure.
One of the things you're getting to is kind of going through to your junior year. 2020 was a big year in many aspects, so we'll kind of get to that. But one of the things it's also kind of big with is the movements like Black Lives Matter. During your junior
Yeah.
year, you started an initiative called a conscious community conversation. Can you kind of tell us what
Yes.
the initiative was like, why you started during the heart of these social injustices?
Yeah, so I think that was very necessary at the time because of the fact that there was a lot of political um noise pollution that no one was able to, or like that very few people were able to sift and distill through without feeling overwhelmed. And I wanted to form a space for US students, both, Black, white, Asian, Native American, that were able, so that they would be able to talk about these hefty and heavy topics in a controlled and safe environment, openly and candidly. So with the help of, I believe, all of my um prefects as well as my close friends led conversations, I think, once a month about different political topics, different um uh emotionally charged current events, in order to help, facilitate that dialogue and discussion, without people feeling like they would be ostracized or demonized for having a certain political view or a certain outlook on the world. I think it's very important to have empathy, especially when you're dealing with such like important and I keep using this word, but heavy topics. Because that's the only way I believe that a good, productive, meaningful change can come about. And so I started that in order to facilitate those discussions. I think that it's an organization. I guess it's a student organization that is needed more times than others. I think now it's really needed. I don't know if it's still in existence, but I think it should definitely make a resurgence because this political moment is particularly divisive and is capitalizing on people feeling divided and people um, uh, being reclusive and protective of their own echo chambers where they're not able to actually learn about other political or moral or social ideologies. And I think that's exactly why we need a forum to talk about, differing and sometimes hard, topics in a way that is conducive to like communal and equal growth from both sides and understanding where they're coming from. So that was the point of conscious community conversations. And yeah,
Yeah, I think that's so important. I like that you said a lot of these topics are emotionally charged, and when they come up in normal conversation, it just goes straight to 'em being emotional. But we do have like
yeah,
current events club. We have in our history classes, we have discussions about it. But I think that that's really important.
sick. That's
Uh,
that's important. As long as they're happening, that's what matters, I think.
yeah, for sure. Well,
Do you guys
being
think it's enough? What's
at
your
US, you mean?
yeah, do you think that the forums and the spaces that you just mentioned are they enough?
I don't know. I feel like sometimes I think as a community, we can come together more and talk about some of the things that are going on kind of in our world.
Mhm.
I think we kind of had I've had a couple of classes. I think mostly in the middle school I can think of where we talked mainly focused on current events, and like those are some of the classes
Mhm.
that me personally kind of stayed with me the longest. Like I can think about those conversations a lot more. But I don't know. I
Mhm.
mean, looking to high school, I feel like we're even more matured. So looking to have those conversations in kind of a like serious way, but also kind of share kind of different information and like keep just a good as you said, conscious community conversation, right? I feel like is kind
Yeah.
of evident we need.
I mean, to answer your question, if it's enough, I don't think it can really ever be enough, but I think we would benefit from having, at the current events club, I think we get maybe 10 students, but I think if having a larger scale with more perspectives would definitely be helpful.
Yeah, fair enough. Is Society of Skeptics still a thing?
It kind of stopped last year, so
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. That was also pretty important for me. I remember, especially because I was in high school during the into the Biden administration, in like the beginning of the Trump administration. Obviously I was middle school into high school, and so that was super important in, facilitating discussions politically. And I remember going and having a lot of fun and being able to talk about some pretty, like I say, emotionally charged things, but in a way that was intriguing and promoted dialogue in a non-combative way.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
bring it
we
back.
just
That was great for me.
yeah, well, we just had a class in our history class, or Israel and Palestine and that conflict, not necessarily the current events, but the history of it. And I just finished up
Mhm.
my essay on how, you know, we think it's just like one word complicated, but then you look back and it goes back to traceable events that happened, and it's not as
Mm.
complicated maybe as we may think. So it's important to
Mm.
be
Yeah,
educated on those things.
it is. It is indeed. Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of going back to some of your high school experience, one of the things that we never got to personally feel because we were in fifth grade at the time, but 2020 was kind of the
Man. Oh
year,
my God.
right? So as a junior, right, going through the processes of colleges and many other of the kind of toughest parts of high school must be really hard. I mean, kind of stuck at home during the pandemic. So what was it like to be a junior then? And do you feel like you missed out on anything?
Did I miss out on anything? No. I actually gained a lot. I was so I think about that actually kind of often. Like, okay, if COVID never happened, what would my life look like and how would it have been different? And what sort of challenges would I have faced? I think that the pandemic and the push to online schooling offered a very necessary, very timely, for me at least, pause, um, and reflection period, that was pretty necessary, at least in my uh growth at that time. And so I am very happy that we not very happy, that might sound like ridiculous, but I am content with the way that things happen. Um, especially like, I'm not the worst, but I'm like a okay test taker. I'm not the best at it. And so like, because colleges went test optional that year, I was like, wow, this is great because now I don't have to take the ACT or the SAT. Look at that. Um, and other more salient to in my head, and therefore in my application parts of those college applications, were able to be highlighted just a little bit more seriously, like my extracurriculars, like my GPA. And so I was, I was cool, and like, I don't know. I know that it was a time that was filled with a lot of loss, and a lot of, pain. And while I did have, familial struggle during the time, I think that um it offered a great deal for me in my academic journey, my, spiritual and my like intellectual journey as well. And so yeah, I don't think I lost all that much, honestly.
By senior year, you kind of talked about real quick, but you became head prefect. Why did you want to be
Mhm.
head prefect? Was it like a long-term goal of yours, or did someone kind of encourage you to run for that role?
Yeah, I think So head prefect, if I'm not mistaken, was an elected position amongst prefects. And I think the prefects just all like voted on a head prefect. Um, and I was the one that was voted head prefect, but I didn't think of running in like the preliminary round to become a prefect, period. Um, until I was sort of, motivated to by some friends to do it. Like why not? Okay, I was like, okay, well, let's do it. Let's see what happens. And then that's how that happened. I would not change a thing. I think that being a prefect was very important for me because it allowed me to gain some very necessary leadership experience. And it allowed me to do and enact some very important, in my view, um, pedagogy, at least with conscious community conversations, and then bringing my specific vantage to um, the U.S. administration. So I think becoming a prefect was very important in my, trajectory. Becoming head prefect kind of just happened, but I think it was a good thing that it happened. So yeah. Are you guys
That's
thinking about becoming prefects when you're seniors?
Ironically, we both are in the same house and both want to become or both want to become prefect. So
Oh, okay. Well, good luck. May the best man win, I guess.
thank you.
But
yeah.
I know that you both will be amazing, in any position that you pursue.
Yeah.
It sounds like kind of by senior year, you were a high achieving student. I mean, you did all these different things, but one of the things that kind of people experience when you have so many different responsibilities is kind of burnout. So, did you ever feel like this is too much, or like what did you kind of do to relax or have fun during your like busy schedule?
Yeah, the funny thing about that is everything I did, I thoroughly enjoyed. So it didn't feel like I was doing all that much work. Well, prefect meetings were early in the morning. So I guess during those times I was like, why did I do this? But like being on the squash team, the most enjoyable experience I've ever had. Like some of my closest friends to date have were on the squash team with me. Being in the jazz band was beautiful. I, was able to develop a very strong musicianship because of it. I was able to develop a really interesting outlook and perspective on the world because of my understanding of the context in which jazz was created. Um, and French was something that I was gonna do anyway, might as well enjoy it. Like everything I did was something that was interesting to me. And I'm the type of person that is not content unless I have my hands in a few pots, in a few different pots. And so each of my interests was being piqued simultaneously. So I was never bored. I was never like, why is this happening to me right now? So I was never burnt out, I don't think. And I don't think I ever felt a sense of burnout. I probably at times felt that, what I was doing was important and I wanted it to go well and thus would put some added pressure on myself to make sure it went well. But I don't think it was ever burnout, or fatigue or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, Charlie and I collaborate on a lot of stuff, and one of our rules of thumb is like if we don't enjoy it, we're not going to do it. Like we're not going to do stuff just for the
Exactly.
college application. But I know a lot of
Exactly.
students are like, well, I have to do this, put on the college application. What's your advice for students who may be pressured to do things just for the college application?
I would say, well, don't, because that's gonna be very easy to read in your application. Like, let's just say it's junior year and you're like, oh, I gotta put something on my college application. What is it gonna be? Don't, do anything that would not be something that you would talk about just randomly with an Uber driver or someone over coffee or anything like that, because it will read as something that you're not passionate or interested in long term, or it will read as something that isn't going to be a salient part of your identity as a college student. So I would say do things that you're actually interested in, do things that make you excited about. And then from there, time will just do what time does and move. And so by the end of it, you're like, oh, I spent a year or 2 or 3 or 4 years doing this one thing, and it didn't really feel like it because this is something that I just liked doing so much. So I would say don't do things just for the bit. Do them like because you want to.
Yeah. Well, amidst all of the interesting work that you had and with school, I know there must have been some fun or funny moments. So, what's one of your favorite or funniest moments from US? And if you can't pinpoint one moment, what are some of the spaces that you had those moments in?
Oh, great question. Great question. I can I pinpoint? I don't know. I don't know if I can pinpoint one. Definitely the squash court had some crazy, funny um conversations, jokes, bits. I remember, I don't know if it's still a thing, but like the lower commons, it was called, I don't know if it was called Monkey Island or if that was in the middle school, but um oh my gosh, that was just like the funniest area in the school. If you wanted to have a good laugh, you go to the lower commons. There would always be something ridiculous and silly going on. Where else? I think Dr. Dyke's chemistry classes were super funny. And I really liked him a lot. Mr. Fallon's AP lit and lang classes were also great. Um, and yeah, I think those were the most salient spaces and events, or not really events, but the more salient spaces where the funny, interesting conversations and jokes would occur. The Pembroke Society meetings obviously were a riot. I remember those quite fondly. Not exactly what was said, but just sort of the energy of the space was um hilarious.
Kind of like going to after your graduation, your next
Yeah.
stop was Harvard, right? Uh, I mean, this may be a hard question, but why Harvard? You probably had a lot of options at the time. Why did you kind of choose Harvard for college, and what did you end up officially kind of pinpointing your major down to?
Yeah, when I was applying to school, my dream since I was in middle school at least was to go to Georgetown. Georgetown was the only school that I actually ended up visiting before the pandemic hit, and you couldn't visit colleges anymore. Um, there were some professors that I was able to meet when I was younger who were at Georgetown, who I admired a lot. And so the goal had always just been Georgetown, 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 Georgetown. 2 weeks before I submitted my Common App, I randomly, for some reason, decided to apply to Harvard. I don't know why. Um, I don't know what compelled me to do that. Um, and I was nervous, so I didn't tell anybody I was doing that. Everybody thought I was still applying to Georgetown. And so I cooked up my application, sent it right before the winter break, heard back that I had gotten in, and didn't apply anywhere else because I was like, this is it. This is kind of the goal for me at this stage. So why would I rack my brain about what, cartoon character I most, related to? Like these stupid, ridiculous college application questions that no one really has answers to. I'm not gonna do that anymore. I am set. I'm set. So, um, Harvard was actually the only school I applied to, if you think about it in that way. And so it I guess was meant to be. And when I got here, I declared that I was gonna study neuroscience. And then I realized halfway through my junior year that I had enough credits to also double major in music. So that is what I'll be graduating with in 3 weeks.
No, congrats. I know you're now like in the
Yep.
past 3 weeks. What are your kind of your plans after Harvard? Are you headed kind of straight to medical school, maybe with the neurosurgeon dream, taking a gap year for a
Yeah.
project? Kind of what's the next step after undergrad? And I mean, even looking way forward, where do you kind of see yourself in 10 years?
10 years. Oh my gosh, that's gonna send me into a spiral. I don't know. I do know though that next year, I will be in England. I will be pursuing a master's at Oxford or University of Oxford, in their history department, looking at the history of the program is called History of Science, Medicine, and Technology, where I'll be doing some research on the nexus between medicine and visual art that has very recently become a very important topic for me. Um, and so that's what I'll be doing next year. I literally got that idea a couple months ago over my winter break because I was like, okay, I kind of want to do a gap year. Going straight through to medical school does not seem like it's the vibe right now. And so I was like, okay, let's just apply places. So I applied to Harvard again for their for a master's program at their medical school, Columbia, their bioethics program, and this one. Ended up getting into all three, but the reason that I chose Oxford was because of the fact that it would give me a lot of space to mold the research that I really wanted to do. And it would offer an international moment. Like all of my friends have either done some of these crazy semesters or summers abroad, and I've been stuck in a lab because I'm pre-med. So this is going to be a really good time, and I'm excited for the next year for sure. But that means that I will be applying to medical school next cycle, matriculating in 2027 and graduating in 2031. Um, so how many years is that? That's the next 5 years. And then the next 5 years after that, I'll be in potentially a residency program at some, university. So, or some hospital. So yeah, it was kind of easy. There's the 10 years. Unless something crazy happens where this bastard sort of leads to more uh you know, serious research, which I doubt it would. But if that happens, then I guess that 10-year plan changes a little bit. But right now, that's the layout.
Yeah, I mean that's amazing. We wish you luck. Um,
Thank
but
you.
as someone
Thank
someone who's graduated US, what advice would you give to current university school students like Charlie and I right now, and on how they can make the most of their time at US to kind of set themselves up for success at the next level?
Yeah, for sure. I'd say have fun, do things, like I said earlier, that make you fulfilled and that provide a sense of um content. I think that that's really important so that you feel that when your time has come to leave US and to shake up the world elsewhere, that you feel like you took full advantage of the resources offered to you in high school. Uh, just value friendships. I think US does a really good job of instilling this, but um, your network and connections that you form in high school are super important. Those that you form in college, I'd argue, are even more important. So just make sure that you're an active member of the community, which is very easy to do because there's only like 100 people per class. Um, but I think that's an important thing that sometimes people might overlook or that might be eclipsed by, the academic or extracurricular grind. Just be present and be an active member of your community. Make US a better place than when you found it and when you got there. And if you do that, you'll take full advantage of everything that place has to offer. And I think that you will your mark will indeed be indelible.
I know we're getting to our last question, but this is something we ask all of our guests. What is your why?
Okay.
With everything you do, whether it be in kind of medicine, the arts, or just making a change in the community, what is the core driving force that kind of gets you up in the morning and always keeps you going?
My why, my why. What's my why? I don't know. My why. What am I motivated by? I'm motivated by so many things, and that's why it's hard for me to like pinpoint one. I think if I were to do this like long CVS list of whys, one of them would definitely be, um, you know, building community with my peers and with the people who I um just see on a day to day. Um, I think being, as I just said, with the advice to current U.S. Um, uh, students, being uh, an active and um, contributing member to any community, whether it's a familial community, whether it's an extracurricular community, whether it's the community that you go home to every night, is really important. And it's the way in which meaningful change is enacted. So I think that's one of my whys. Another one of my whys is curiosity. Like I'm a very curious person, and so I like to learn and I like to know different things about different sectors. Um, which is why I surround myself in large part with people who don't study what I study. Like a lot of my friends are like either social studies or history of art and architecture or government or music or not music so much, but like um um what public policy. Because of the fact that I like to learn different things and what okay, so I'm a neuroscience major. What are we going to talk about? Like neurons and the brain? Like I already know that. Like you know as much as I know. So what am I gonna learn from those interactions? I like learning about, policy. I like learning about, what makes a good quote artwork, what makes a long-lasting work of art. I like to learn about, why the recent ruling on the Supreme Court just came out with was, a bad one or a good one. And so like I like surrounding myself with people who will educate me and who I will learn from. So curiosity is another why. Um, Friendship is another why for very obvious reasons, and that goes quite well with my first why. So I think those might be the two most important ones. Like I said way earlier in our interview, community service is also and leadership in that way is also very important. So those are my whys, if that uh was coherent. I felt like I was rambling. It wasn't, I don't know if I gave like being concrete, but those are my whys.
Yeah, but we get a different answer from everyone, so we love asking that one. All right, well, Charlie
Yeah.
lied. We got one more fun one for you. Um,
Okay,
well,
sick.
today
Let's do it.
today was our seniors put on their senior prank, and because they didn't do Halloween this year, um, the seniors threw their own Halloweens. They decorated the entire
Oh no.
school, and like all dressed up in Halloween costumes. But when you were a senior, do you remember what your senior prank was?
Oh, I knew you were about to ask that, and I don't. I think, what did we do? I remember it being pretty like tame. I saw on the US Instagram that you guys like flipped tables and chairs over, which was really funny. But I don't remember I want to say this was either my year or the year above me. They drove a car into like the what's it called? What's the green space right outside of the lower commons?
Um,
Does it have a name?
uh, I don't know if it has a name.
Okay. Well, whatever it's called, and did nothing else. I don't think that was all that um radical. So we obviously didn't do anything memorable, but this was cool. This was good. What you guys did this year.
Well, Toussaint, it's been great having you on the show today. Thank you so much for taking the time to kind of share your
Of
stories,
course.
experiences with us, and insights. To our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll hope you'll join us next Wednesday for the next episode of Late Start Show. Thanks, Toussaint.
Of course. Thanks so much.